moments for people to gather.
Wow, 27 attendees. Do we have to admit them?
No, they just come in automatically now once I hit the webinar button. So you'll see in the participants list at the bottom there, we've got 30 people so far that are joining us. So. All right, I think I'll start with the introduction now while people are coming in. So hello and welcome everyone. Leslie Lampton here from the Ridgefield Library. And we're so pleased you're all able to join us this evening on this cold and snowy night. Sometimes Zoom has its benefits, so tonight's one of them. So this program is part of the library's Noreen L. Papa Mothers Live Your Life series. And we are thrilled this evening to have Amy Oestreicher, author of My Beautiful Detour, An Unthinkable Journey from Gutless to Grateful, here with us this evening. We're going to take there's going to be time for questions, so you can type those into the chat or the Q&A function, whichever you prefer. And at the end, 3 lucky people are going to win signed copies of Amy's book. So Elaine Weiler will be joining us as well to help with the Q&A. She's Amy's publicist. But now I'd like to introduce Amy. She's got a very long bio, so I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. But Amy is an Audio Award nominated author, writer for the Huffington Post, speaker for TEDx, health advocate, award-winning actress, mixed media artist, songwriter, and playwright. As a survivor and thriver of multiple traumas, Amy eagerly shares the gifts of life's beautiful detours and the tremendous gifts that can be reaped from adversity. She's toured Gutless and Grateful for her original one-woman musical autobiography since its NYC debut in 2012. She's headlined international conferences on leadership, entrepreneurship, women's rights, mental health, disability, creativity, and domestic violence prevention. She's a top mental health writer for Medium and a regular lifestyle, wellness, and arts contributor for over 70 notable online and print publications. Her story has appeared on NBC's Today, CBS, and in Cosmopolitan, 17 magazine, and many other publications. So without further ado, please welcome Amy Oestreicher. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks for having me, Leslie. Nice to be at the Zoom Ridgefield Library.
Yeah, cool. So, Amy, do you want to tell us, what it is you want to say about resilience this evening, and give us a little background about yourself?
A little background about myself. Well, I talk about resilience a lot, and how we can all find it. And I published my memoir a year ago, but I'm finding, especially now, what I used to become resilient through my crazy little journey is especially important right now, because it's we are also now in a state of kind of uncertainty and limbo and not knowing where to go next. So I'm going back to, in retrospect, I call these like my 4 skills to resilience, which I discovered in going through this journey. So I wanted to share really quickly how these resilience skills help me. So I think before this pandemic, we all had our lives pretty much planned out, or at least what next week and the next week would be like. I don't think any of us anticipated that however many months later we'd be wearing masks everywhere, and the word social distancing was not in our awareness. So, I was driven to do musical theater my entire life, and was set to go to college for it. And, at 17, I'm confident I got my life all figured out. So I'd been accepted and everything. Then when I was 18, I had just very bad stomach pain that wasn't going away. And I ended up
I'm sorry to interrupt, Amy, but the sound's a little distorted. I wonder if you could get a little closer to the microphone. I think that might help. So
Hello, can you hear me?
yeah, I think you could go a little back, but I think that sounds a bit better. Thank you.
Well, now you can hear me.
Perfect.
But so basically, I woke up in an ICU hospital months later, wondering what had happened and how did I wake up in this alternate universe. And then that's when doctors told me I couldn't eat or drink again, and they didn't know when or if that would ever happen again. We were thinking with this pandemic, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe 9, 10 months. It's kind of the same situation where we don't really have a calendar, a deadline. But basically, I was discharged from the hospital as a kind of gutsy, 18, 19-year-old, wondering like, well, what do I do for this time? And doctors were just saying, go home, rest, heal, and we'll let you know what happens. But as someone who never wants to just kind of crawl in bed, and creativity and theater was always kind of my life force, and I was going to college, I was like, what do I do? And I'm hungry and I can't eat. I was sustained on IV nutrition, but don't tell me hunger is not psychological. And when you want to be in the outside world and you see someone chugging a water bottle or eating a sandwich, that's not going to make you really upset. So I had to creatively brainstorm how I could see the path ahead of me, which at this point wasn't a detour. At this point, it just felt like I was on uncharted no man's land. So again, in retrospect, I realized these things, but the first thing I discovered was that hope isn't just, baseless, wishful thinking where you just think, oh, I hope things will get better. I have faith things will get better. I realized hope is something you have to actively create for yourself, just like an athlete, envisions that finish line. So when I got home from the hospital, I'd make big countdowns on my wall, counting down 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 days till I could eat again for years. And it was completely pretend, but visualizing that for me gave me hope. And I also got into baking and starting a chocolate business because I wanted to create and manifest that actual vision of seeing hope for myself, that things would get better in the future. And that would actually give me something tangible to work towards rather than just, okay, I'm going to hope things get better. Then the next skill I call for resilience is creativity. I call myself a creative fireball, but I feel that creativity is for everyone. It's just a different way of moving our energy. It's a way of seeing things differently, even seeing the pandemic as something different, or as a way to, take advantage of this time for rest and pause and reflection. Creativity was also a great way for me to express things that I couldn't put into words yet. So, coming out of trauma in the hospital, and I had just been sexually assaulted before my coma, and finally becoming alert and processing all these things together, I couldn't think about everything together. I needed to somehow process it for myself, whether it was through movement or doodling or some way to get my energy flowing in a way where I didn't have to freeze and over intellectualize everything. And creativity, I just call a really good container for us to be with those like ugly emotions that we find when life doesn't go as we plan. It's a way to be with it without running away from it. So that creativity could be in like a conversation. in laughter, in cooking, in just snapping your fingers. It's any way to get that out of us, because there's, one thing I learned about energy is you can't run away from it. You can't run away from those like scary emotions. They just come back in other ways. So you have to find your own creative way to be with it. So my third skill is stories. That's why I'm really happy that I'm giving this virtual talk at a library. Because once I discovered the power of stories, it gave me a map for myself. And this was first through just finding an old book of mythology and noticing that, hey, like all these people in these myths and these gods and things like that, a lot of them are going through this path where they're going into darkness and coming into the light, transformed with a gift to give society. And that was, the archetypal hero's journey. But after I read that, I'm like, okay, I don't know where my life is going, and I don't have a calendar or map, but I'm going to use that as my map because I'm finding it everywhere from Wizard of Oz to Lord of the Rings to Star Wars to anything. And so just reading stories gave me a map, and listening to the stories all around me. They also gave me the courage to eventually come up with the words to start writing my story for myself, which is how eventually this came into the picture. But really, that came full circle for me. And why, my book is called My Beautiful Detour. I didn't really think of it as a detour, let alone like a beautiful detour, until I realized the power of stories. And I also came back to what I loved. And how that happened is I always had wanted, I had planned on doing musical theater. I studied professionally my entire life. I mean, coming out of the hospital with IVs and not being able to walk, let alone talk, till, my tracheotomy was removed, and having to relearn all of that was discouraging. But I decided finally, when I built up enough strength, that, you know what? I'm going to go through all this journaling I did. I'm going to put it together in some kind of way. I'm going to sing some songs that really resonate to that. And I'm going to come back to theater, but I'm going to tell my own story. And so that really came to fruition when I premiered my first one-woman musical in 2012, which was called, Gutless and Grateful. And the reason why that was such a transformative process for me was because up till now, I was starting to journal about what had happened to me, and excerpts of that are in my book, but I wasn't really finding the meaning behind it. For me, it was just a relief to get it all out. But when I had to think about it in terms of, okay, I want to share this with people and I want to do what I love and go back on stage, I had to think about, okay, what makes a story structure? What makes a theatrical art? Where in all these journalings is like the rising action and the climax, and where is the lesson that the hero learns and the message, and putting all those events together. That was really my turning point, where I realized, wow, this was a beautiful detour, because look at this arc. Like, if I hadn't been forced in that direction, I would not have met this person. I wouldn't have learned this about myself. I wouldn't have done this. And I can't even say what my life would be like without it, because this detour has made me who I am. So even just writing the script for that show based on all these old journals, that's really how I really not just accepted what I had been through, but embraced it. That, you know, I hate to say I'm happy this happened to me, but this is me, this is my life. And so that was another way that the power of stories really helped me and really made me accept where I was. And that's also how I started this Love My Detour idea, where I realized, it doesn't matter what we've been through. We all experience, times when life doesn't go our way. So what if instead of, swapping war stories where we're talking about like, this trauma happened to me or that thing happened to me, what if we just all called it a detour, not to like minimize what we've been through, because anything we've been through is, relative to us in terms of what it means. But what if we focused more on the uniqueness of what that detour has forced us to do? I mean, for me, I would have never gotten into, everything from teaching nursery school to karate to masters in puppetry to all these beautiful people that I only met because of this. And so that's what I call my first TED Talk, the flowers on my detour. And I feel like sometimes we get caught up in labels of I've been through this or I've been through that, or right now with the news, on every second telling us, every crisis going on right now, it's very easy for me, at least, to feel paralyzed by all that. But what if knowing that this is all, now it is really a universal detour we're going through with this pandemic, what if we focused on, as long as, we, wear our masks and adhere to all the safety protocols that we're supposed to, what if we focused on the pandemic is here, now what can that, allow us to do? So then I got to get to my fourth skill, which is gratitude. So, I don't know if any of you on here try to write like a gratitude list every night. It's kind of hard to keep reminding yourself to be grateful when it takes you, I was not able to eat or drink for around 6 years and 28 surgeries. But a week after I premiered my one woman musical in 2012, I had one more surgery, which landed me way back farther than I ever expected to be. And I was upset. I was mad because I was literally singing and dancing about all this, making fun of everything a week before. And so again, I was not allowed to eat or drink, and I really felt back to square one, as I'm sure, we all have felt sometimes when the rug gets pulled out from under us. And so to keep just my hands busy, because I was starving, for those 4 months in the hospital, I just made lists A to Z, and I just made myself, just to keep my mind occupied. Again, like, have any of you guys tried to like get your mind off of food? It's hard. And it's hard. So I would make myself write one thing I was grateful for every letter of the alphabet. And even if they were like stupid little things like spot of light out the window in my ICU cubicle for S. But as I made these lists over and over and over again, I realized that those gratitude things on my list, those were coming from a larger place. And I was really discouraged to be back in the ICU, literally when tap dancing on stage in New York the week before. But seeing that those values, they had these larger themes coming from a larger place, like, oh, window, right, nature is important to me. Dad called, D for dad, family is important to me. I realized or it made me remember that I was larger than any medical circumstance. And when life takes a detour, your values are kind of your compass that steer you, so you know where to go. Besides the archetypal hero's journey and stories, which helped me too, but that really helped center me, knowing that all these events happening here and there, feeling like I'm tossed a curveball every second, it's okay because I know what my values are. And so that was really important. So that was like a really quick version of, again, what I realized in retrospect. And what I love about these skills that I now call skills, they're creativity, hope, stories, and gratitude. I mean, how many times a day do you hear those words? They're not like big behavioral therapy techniques or anything like that. So the cool thing is, I mean, especially now, anyone can find them. Sometimes you got to be pushed to use them, which I was, and I think now we're all being pushed to look outside of our Zoom boxes and into ourselves. So it's I'm finding now that for this uncertain period of time, although definitely not as traumatic because I can eat and drink now. But I can still use those, and I'm hoping, I write about in my book how, the trials and errors I tried with each of them, and sometimes they were more successful, and sometimes they just made me sadder, and sometimes they made me happier, and that's how it goes. I mean, I don't expect by finding all the flowers on your detour, it just is the recipe for happiness. But it was a recipe for going forward. And I knew no matter what's ahead, it's my job to keep going forward because every moment could be new. And I don't want to miss the next one. And that's how I'm approaching this time too. So I don't even know what time it is, but
yeah, if people have any questions for
Yeah.
Amy, write them in the chat or the Q&A. I'm sure she'd be very happy
and I did
answer them.
If it's okay with you, Leslie, I wanted to read a short excerpt from my book.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Yeah.
So that let's see if I can point in correspondence to the Zoom screen. Yes, that painting, the singing tree. That's the painting of my book. And visual art was one of the best flowers besides all the amazing people I met just because of this. But that was a beautiful flower on my detour. Because really before that, all I was thinking was musical theater. But I realized that, anyway, I discovered this not in a way I expected. And I'm gonna read a little bit of that from my book. This was after 13 surgeries, and I was supposed to eat and drink again, and it worked for a week, and then my wound exploded, and then I was sent back to Yale for another limbo period where doctors tried to figure out what to do. Here we go. Art saved me. Passing the morning hours at Yale was always the hardest as I agonizingly waited for the day to start, the sun to rise, the rush of doctors to come in like a stampede of chaos, and then to be left with time monotonously ticking away until the night shift of nurses arrived. I was used to waking up and feeling overpowering sadness. That's why, as soon as the nurses could rearrange my wires at the break of dawn, I'd hop out of bed with my tubes dangling and leaking and fling myself onto the yoga mat I tucked beside the hospital overbed table. The sooner I could start moving, the less I'd have to think about or feel. One morning, my sadness was paralyzing. I didn't want to move at all. But if I couldn't squirm my way out of numbness, what was I supposed to do? Just be with my feelings? I longed for the safety to actually feel, but Yale was a hotbed of too much uncertainty to even try. But if I ignored these feelings, I'd only hurt more. I needed a plan B before this despair threatened to swallow me whole. Some strategy to cope with emotions that were too big to run from. I remember the exact moment I painted for the first time. My mom had brought in some cheap art supplies, canvases, a few brushes, and a kid set of craft acrylics with lids to screw off, along with various gadgets and anything else you could find in the lobby gift shop to help us pass the time. For a while, the canvases and paints just sat there, crowded in a corner with the rest of the cluttered distractions. But that morning, a solemn feeling of stillness washed over me, like a pale tint of blue paint. For the first time, even my racing, anxious heartbeat couldn't drown out my despair. I needed something to hold on to, so I went for the paintbrush, still wrapped in plastic in the dark of the morning, and thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm feeling something really strongly and I can't run from it right now. I am just going to hold this paintbrush, and whatever this feeling is, I'm just going to put it into this. I remember holding that paintbrush so strongly that my IV was trembling as I pressed down hard on that canvas to drag one smooth, wavy line. I don't remember letting go as the brush dipped from brown to red to blue. What I created was Singing Tree. Nurses who had written me off as the restless, manic patient now saw that I had a heart. A quick glance at my medical history should have been enough, but as I made art, they found compassion for the pain I was going through, and they really liked my paintings. Suddenly, creating art became a way to express emotions that were too overwhelming for words. I found my voice again, the Amy I could recognize, who no medical intervention could surgically remove. I used everything in my art, even toilet paper from the hospital bathroom. Thank you, Yale. I painted my trees that I missed. I crafted my outside and inside worlds, bursting with joy and pain, tears and hearts, lightning bolts and flowers. Each morning, before the medical team came in for rounds, I would take out a plastic palette tray and stare at yet another blank canvas. Like the answers the doctors were coming out with. I would dip a small paintbrush into that kid set of paints and paint a brown wavy line, always a call out to my trees to ground me. As the lines thickened, so did their trunks and my sense of confidence. I could know where to go from here, even if doctors couldn't. When I was done, I'd put each canvas outside my hospital room. Soon, the unit began to catch on. Nurses started walking their patients by my room to see what I'd created each day. And having an impact on others through my improvised brushstrokes filled me with unanticipated satisfaction, a meaning. Art was sustaining my aliveness. My life had changed, but myself was still vital as ever in whatever colors I dipped my brush in. And so that's the cover image on my book. And what's so interesting about this Singing Tree painting is now when you look at it, it's just art. It's okay. It's not fragile. It's just this happy tree, but it was created at such a time of despair and terrible feelings. And that's what really reminded me of how art can be so transformative. We can feel all these terrible things, make it, and then years pass and we only have the artwork, and then we can look back at it. So that's kind of, hopefully, it inspires you to do something, whether it's just like sit and breathe and feel that, or doodle or write, or call a friend, or do something to just like show yourself, you know what, this pandemic is going on, but like I'm here in it. And years later, people are also going to be looking for not only like what the news, the statistics that were shown about everything, they're going to want to know like the oral histories, like what was it like for families, what was it like for individuals going through that. I know people that are curious now, like what we know about the pandemic at the beginning of the 20th century, but I would have really loved to know what emotions they were feeling, things like that. So more than ever, I mean, write something. And then you make art on COVID masks and all that kind of stuff. And I've been painting ever since. So yeah.
Fabulous. Your writing is so beautiful, Amy. Did you always write when you were a kid, or is that something you came to later? Or?
I was always creating stories in my head. I was always writing, and I'm scarred yet intrigued for life by my middle school teacher, who was like, Miss Oestreicher, you need a little more word economy. But from the text and language, that's how I became a playwright. I have a few more books coming out, and a few scripts I'm working on. So for me, writing was just one of the many ways I got out all these stories in my head.
And how long did it take you to write the book, Amy?
So from all the journaling and everything like that, and putting everything together and the extra writing, it took me 2 years to write. Speaking to Mr. O'Brien and his word economy comment, it took me 5 years to edit because for those 7 years, if people ask, was eating and drinking and nearly 30 surgeries not hard? Yeah, it was very hard. So there was a lot I wanted to share, but I also wanted to make it a good read for people. So I eventually got it into a format that people really seem to be resonating with. And the audiobook just came out last week, so I'm really excited. So
what new features are added to the audiobook version?
So the cool part about that is, first of all, the audiobook incorporates like a lot of my musical excerpts and stuff, which I didn't realize was not usual for audiobooks. When the engineer was like, this is an audiobook unlike any other. I also have some cool cameos, like the foreword is written by the surgeon who saved my life and my exploding stomach. And the new version, which is now in the new print edition, is I'm so honored to have an afterword written by William Finn, who's the Tony Award-winning composer and lyricist who you can read in my book, but he had become a mentor in my life right before my coma. He ended up coming to my ICU hospital graduation in Columbia Presbyterian, and I ended up touring my one-woman show to his theater series, and he's just been such a wonderful, again, flower on my detour. So he's just recorded and written the afterword, and it really means a lot. So thank you, William Finn. You're an awesome person.
Sounds great. Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to write a memoir? What do you give them?
It's just quickly what I said now, like everyone's story counts. I mean, the worst thing I mean, listen, I welcome all feedback, but I hate hearing from people like, I haven't been through anything that, compared to what you have been through. It's all a detour. Suffering is relative to us, and your story matters. It not to sound cheesy, but all cheese comes from a true place. And just speaking this pandemic alone, people are going to be curious. not just about what they're hearing from the news, but they're going to want to know about people, what they experienced. And if you don't want to write about this time, write about something else. But I know for me, if I had started thinking, okay, I'm going to write a memoir, where do I start? I would have just froze. Just start writing. Don't think about if it's going to be a memoir, what other form it will take. Maybe it's just a letter that you end up sending to yourself or someone, but just start writing. One of the coolest, easiest things to do, honestly, I'm sure you can find one of those like line a day journals that go for 5 years. I kept one of those for a while. I even take passages into my memoir. But what's cool about that is I know a lot of people get intimidated by journaling. It's so low commitment. You only have room, which is good for me. I need like limited space. To write like one thought. If you miss one day, you can go back, and it's for 5 years, so you can really see where you've gone. But just start. Don't think about it. Just start.
That's great. And Sherry here has a question for you.
Hey,
how did you submit your work to publishers and theaters when you were working on your physical strength? So how did you have the energy to do all of this, basically, is the question.
Yes, I'm run by creative energy. And honestly, when it's kind of amazing the things that you try to do to get your mind off hunger, to be honest. I mean, think about it. You don't have those meal times to break up your day. So for a while, it was not a fun way to live, because for a while, I had to keep doing all that stuff just to get my mind off of, it's one thing when you're in the hospital nest and like that stuff is kind of barricaded from you. But when you want to be in the outside world, my mom would freak out worrying if I'd like forget and eat a pretzel. I mean, I got nervous every time I washed my hands at the sink, knowing that like I could remember what a sip of water tastes like. So a lot of that I just did and did and did just to keep going. But eventually, once I could eat and felt like real vital life force energy, it was almost like for me, creating and performing is kind of my way of not only making my mark, but giving back and connecting with community. And food is such a social, I could have called this book just Food. I'm sure that title is taken. But food is so much a requirement to be part of the community. I just, it was my way of really immersing myself back into the world that I missed so much. So for me, it was natural. I had to do it. So.
Right. And how are you bringing this work virtually to help mental health of students and guide them in their own uncertain current times?
Well, again, listen, this was definitely like a specific incident that happened to me, but my graduation wasn't planned either. I never expected my headmaster to surprise me in the ICU with a cap and diploma and everything. And again, like I was someone who's like, okay, I was accepted to college. When am I going to go? And doctors are like, no, you got to at least be able to stand up without falling over. And right now, dealing with transitions, period, COVID or not, college and, being a student is a scary time, because, doors are open that we didn't even know existed. And it's hard for us to really figure out and center ourselves in what's important to us in order to make our own path, especially, with mental health and things like that. So I'm finding now more than ever is a great time for me to take this work to students and colleges right now who definitely were not anticipating this online format, and things constantly changing, as a way to be like, not just, man, I'm 18 and I'm pissed this had to happen, because I was pissed too. But that didn't really get me much. So it's really, the presentations I've done so far during this have really opened some students' minds, which really means a lot to me, because it's a really pivotal time, and we can use that time. We can use this time to make us or break us. But if we can use it as a time to take an opportunity to find those flowers, then I'm so passionate about helping people virtually. So.
That's fabulous. And Em has a question here.
Hey, Em.
That this is your own traumatic journey, and I would surmise that it was just as traumatic for your family, especially your parents who were probably your primary caregivers. How have your closest relationships evolved since your coma?
Anyone who's reading my memoir will know I have the worst family. No, I mean, the minute you read my memoir, I would not be here if I had not had the most supportive family in the world. And without going into a whole thing, I mean, a lot of that's in my book, and I have a lot of journal entries from people in my family. But you're right, that trauma does not just affect the individual, and that's what I wanted to capture too in this. It affects the family, it affects the community, but it can also affect them in positive ways. And the biggest example I love bragging about, because he's my brother, but one of my brothers, Jeff, he went to school for political science and he had graduated and done and everything. He came to the ICU when all this happened, and he just stayed with me. And for the first 72 days, his way of coping, speaking of writing, was in his laptop, journaling about every day that happened, from, literally the first night when the doctor was like, okay, the doctors told us you're not going to make it through the night, all the way until, as things evolve, like the family gets a sense of humor. Dad's sleeping in the janitor's closet. They're making friends with everyone. One of them's dating the night nurses. But I found those journals much later, and actually wrote a play based on that. But what that detour inspired Jeff to do is he was so inspired by, really, the doctors worked like heck to save my life because I should have been dead that night. But he was like, you know what, I'm going to be a doctor. And we're all like, okay, Jeff, sure. And now, he got his postdoc, he went to med school, he's been a doctor, he's now where everyone, send him all the best right now because he's working on the front lines for COVID right now. But again, another detour. So when someone we know and we love goes through a detour and it causes us to shift gears because of that, you embrace that too, because you never know where that may lead. But yes, if you read my book, you will see how, the family was, and then the community, once I was finally able to get out there, was just so supportive. And that is, again, why I want people to start talking about these things, because what I learned is healing from trauma and having PTSD, these are not things we can heal on our own through thinking ourselves out and processing ourselves. You heal from anything through community. You heal through empathy, which is why I'm so drawn towards theater and creating shows. I've just created 2 more multimedia one-woman shows that I've been touring, and now I live stream, because what I love about theater is it creates a universal experience where people may have not gone specifically through that one thing, but you've all sat in a movie theater or maybe a theater and seen a very specific incident being told, but you relate on a deeper level. And that's why I've always loved theater. And as someone who's been through trauma, I think it's a gift and an honor to be able to share what it's like for someone, but in a positive way that at least connects with empathy. I think right now, when we're all feeling such different things, whether it's this or something else on the news, we need to not use, fighting words, and this is a time to come together. So that's what theater does for me, and that's what I hope this book does too. to be honest.
That's great, Amy. And can you discuss your companion book, Creativity and Gratitude? I hear that.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. That's on pre-order now, but time flies when you're in a Zoom box. That'll be available February 10th, I believe. So that I'm working with Apollo Publishers, who contacted me after on this book that they wanted to create some kind of companion workbook on these 4 skills, which, in my workshops, I based on these skills, I have worksheets and all that stuff. And I've always wanted to create like a companion workbook where people could actually practice these in their own homes or wherever you are. So it's designed as like 52 weeks of where, for so many weeks you practice each skill in very easy, creative, fun activities. And so I just got to look at the advanced reader copy, and it looks awesome, which is so exciting. Because I'm a writer, but I'm not a technical person, so I don't do great layout stuff and things like that. But they took care of all that. But that will be out soon, and I'm so excited for people to start trying these things. And it would be very meaningful for me knowing that things I did to cope with a very unique experience, people dealing with anything can use. And it's fun. So, yeah, it's called Creativity and Gratitude. I posted in this chat thingamajig that we use these days.
I think you just posted it to the panelists, though, Amy. So if you could repost that to all of the audience as well, I think that would be great.
As you see, I am so great at everything technical. A panelist and attendees. There we go.
There you go. Perfect.
But all that stuff you can find on my top link shop. But there's also all these other things. And also, like, I like hearing from everyone. So, email me. I'm on social media thing that Facebook was kind of booming when I was in Coma. So I write about that too, that when I woke up, I'm like, what are my friends trying to set up a profile for me on? But that was interesting. But yeah.
Okay, I see another question here from Mary. You've talked a fair bit about how self-expression helps people deal with trauma. What would you say to people who don't feel creative or are intimidated to even try?
Right, and I talk a lot about this in my workshops and things like that. And I have handouts too that I can send you. Well, they're in my workbook, but so creativity, like, get out of your mind that it's for artists or you have to paint or create. I mean, even if it's as simple as if there's like a song on the radio that you like, you happen to like pick up a pen or something and you start not thinking and just thinking about like, I'm going to close my eyes and use your non-dominant hand. For me, it's my left. I'm just going to doodle where that leads me to go. Or if there's something that where you can feel like the physical energy in your body and it just makes you want to do something like add some spices to a recipe. It's I found that it's just a way to get our heads out of the way, because I find that that's the biggest freezing factor in moving forward from everything. For me, that's why I shut off the news, because I don't need to hear more statistics. How are they going to help move me forward right now? So I don't think about, being an artist. I've still never taken like a formal art class. Just find something you do where you don't think. Or for me, like, I love, not in this weather, but taking walks outside and looking at the trees and imagining that they're all taking different shapes. So yeah, that's what I would start with.
All right, great. So we're running up to the end of the program now. So if you've got a few closing words to say, and I know Aline was going to come on, and there she is, as if by magic.
Do you want to do the trivia first, and then Leslie, you can end on the final words?
Yeah, that sounds
okay.
perfect.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aline Weiler, Amy's book publicist. Thanks so much for joining us tonight and hearing Amy's inspiring story and tips for all of us at this time. So as you heard, theater is one of the things that is important to Amy, in addition to writing and art and tap dancing and nature. But we thought it would be fun to ask 3 trivia questions surrounding Broadway, and people just answer in the chat, and the first person who answers correctly will win a personalized free copy of My Beautiful Detour. I also put my email in the chat. You can just email me and give me directions on how to personalize the book and where to ship it. So, and I'll add that again. So, number 1, which character in Hamilton sings "The Room Where It Happens"?
The room where it happens.
It's the actual historical character in the play. If anyone knows that answer.
First is Mary, is that right?
Oh, you know what? I'm not seeing. Hold on one second. I'm not seeing the answer, but
is the answer Burr?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that is Mary.
Okay, so Mary got that right. So sorry. That's great. Congratulations. Moving along, the next question is, who was the original cast member from both Wicked and Rent?
I know.
It's a woman. I'll give you that hint.
Oh, Sherry got it.
So Sherry said Adina Menzel.
That's right.
Go,
right.
Sherry.
Okay, we have Mary and then Sherry. Congrats. Okay, one more. The play Mamma Mia incorporates songs from what band?
Oh, I see ABBA.
Okay, who was first?
It looks like Mary was first again.
Oh, I think we can't.
So we'll go to the second. Yeah, let's go to the second one. Joy.
Terrific. Okay, I will put my email again for those 3 winners, and you guys just send me your information, and you'll get out personalized books. Here we go. So Amy touched on some upcoming projects. Her audiobook is out. The updated print edition is out. Creativity and Gratitude, the companion workbook is coming out February 10th. So lots going on. She has her website up there if you want to speak with her further or book her for any further appearances. And with that, I will hand the virtual mic back to Leslie. Thanks so much for playing.
My email again. Thank you, everyone. And I'm doing online book clubs and all that kind of stuff. So just contact me with anything. And I'm in Zoom world, so I'm here.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank everyone who attended this evening. Obviously, I'd like to thank Amy. I especially loved your hope is something you have to create for yourself. I'm going to take that to heart. That's great. Thank you, everyone, again, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon. Take care, everyone.
And thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Eileen. Good night, everyone.
Good night.